Many thanks to Jub, Jaren, DayZ Podcast, Taggy's Tag West, and that one random for making this video possible. The plate carrier in 1.12 now reduces damage by a monstrous 80%, and many are saying that killing a player with a plate carrier on is way too difficult, especially when sniping. So in this video, we're going to look at the numbers behind these claims to reveal a big truth about armor now, and look at the biggest weapon nerf in the history of DayZ. Probably. While the plate carrier has been buffed in this patch, so has weapon damage. So to determine if plate carriers are too powerful, we're going to compare plate carriers in 1.11 to plate carriers in 1.12. In 1.11, the M4 and AK-101 did 55 damage per shot and 27.5 damage to the plate carrier, where in 1.12, both of these weapons had their damage increased by 75%, but do only 19.2 health damage to plate, resulting in a nerf, as you can see here, of roughly 30%. This means the M4 and AK-101 do 75% extra damage to unprotected players compared to 1.11, as discovered in our previous video, but 30% less to players that are wearing the plate carrier compared to 1.11. While certainly noticeable, a 30% reduction in health damage isn't that dramatic versus plate, but this is one of the least nerfed weapons when it comes to health damage in this video. The AK-74, for example, does 40% less damage to plate now, and the AKS-74U, which does less damage than the 74, is 53% less damage, 53% less health damage this is. The AKM is similar to the M4 and the AK-101, but the VSS and the AS-Val have taken a big hit in this patch, which do 68% less damage to plate compared to 1.11. However, I left the award for the biggest nerf in DayZ history, potentially, and it goes to the VSS and the AS-Val armor piercing rounds, a monstrous 84% less damage compared to the previous patch. 84% is a hell of a lot. It's gone from 95 damage down to 15 damage per shot versus plate. So it would appear that armor piercing rounds in DayZ do not do extra damage, because the regular 9x39s do exactly 15 damage too. All the armor piercing variant does is destroy armor faster, taking 4 shots to bring the plate carrier down to damage quality level, where the 9x39's regular rounds are 10 shots to bring it down to damaged. This means you can kill someone faster with armor piercing rounds when you're shooting armor, but not much faster. Armor piercing rounds used to be way out in front in terms of damage in 1.11 when it came to shooting plate, but now they're no better than assault rifles. Back to the charts, finally we have the LAR or FN FAL, which has received a 55% damage reduction to plate in this patch. If we get an average from this category, the damage reduction to plate in this patch from the assault rifle category is a surprising 52% less damage, which means it's going to take over twice as many shots to kill a player in 1.12 compared to 1.11, basically meaning that the plate carrier absorbs double the amount of bullets it did in the previous patch, a very large buff, I'm sure you'll agree. For sniper rifle health damage, the story is very similar, an average of 49% less damage to players wearing the plate carrier, meaning it's again twice as difficult to kill a player while sniping. The SMGs aren't as affected by this, probably due to the huge damage buffs we saw on the SMGs this patch, resulting in a still large 42% less health damage to the plate. It's a similar story for the rifles. Due to the huge amount of damage buffs we got for the rifles this patch, these weapons aren't as affected, apart from the repeater, which essentially got its health damage cut in half this patch, resulting in 75% less damage to plate carriers. Rip Ether. Shotguns again are displaying the same patterns that we've seen in the other categories, with buckshot, slugs and rubber shells all getting a huge damage nerf when it goes up against plate. However, the category that has been nerfed the most versus plate is the pistol category, probably because the devs said that they want low caliber rounds to do less damage to plate, resulting in 57% less damage on average here, mainly due to the 357s for the Deagle and the Magnum getting gimped. Now if we take the averages from all of the weapon categories and get an average of that, we get an average of 49% damage reduction in how much health damage players receive when wearing the plate carrier vest. This, I believe, is why a lot of players are talking about the plate carrier being OP now. The devs have basically doubled the amount of damage the plate carrier absorbs when it comes to health, slapping a 100% buff onto it, and this is including the huge damage buffs we saw to weapons in this patch. Switching over to shock damage and beginning again with the assault rifles, there hasn't been much of a nerf compared to health damage here, because the shock damage the plate carrier absorbs is 55% instead of 80% like the health damage it reduces. This results in a 24% reduction in how much shock damage is inflicted to players wearing a plate carrier vest now. The sniper rifles have received less of a nerf at just 14%, which doesn't explain why it's so much more difficult to snipe players at a distance now. It's likely the combination of armor being buffed and damage drop off happening sooner. For example, at point blank range, the Mosin has been nerfed by just 8% when it comes to shock damage when shooting the plate carrier, but at 400 meters, that 8% becomes 36% less damage compared to 1.11, which is probably the reason why sniping feels less effective in this patch, because damage drop off happens sooner. To put it simply, shooting anything at a range is harder in this patch, mostly due to how damage drop off works now, but armor certainly fuels the fire of why it's so much more difficult. Relative to other weapon categories, SMGs have had one of the largest nerfs to shock damage versus plate, which is likely due to them using the same rounds as the pistols. Moving on to a buff versus the plate carrier here, surprisingly, this is the SKS from the rifle category. It got a buff of 1% compared to the previous patch, which means it does 1% more damage to the plate carrier than it did in the previous patch. Cool. On the other hand, a weapon that got a big nerf in this patch is the Sporter 22. In 1.11 it did 25 shock damage per shot, now it does 20, so against the plate it does 9 damage per shot, 9 shock damage that is, so it would take 9 shots to KO a player, or nearly the entire magazine to kill them. Shotguns have seen a large nerf too, apart from the rubber shells which had their shock damage doubled, resulting in the biggest buff against plate in this patch at 14%. Finally, we have pistols, which again are the biggest nerfed category against plate, an average of 30% less shock damage here. Again, if we tally up the results from each of the weapon categories, we can see that they're not as nerfed as health damage against plate. This results in a roughly 50% nerf for health damage versus plate, and a 30% nerf for shock damage versus plate across all weapons in the game. Now that we have this data, and we have the data for how buffed weapons are in my previous video, I can show the biggest truth that I've learned in this patch when it comes to damage changes in 1.12. To show you this, I've created this chart that displays the additional health and shock damage players receive without armor in 1.11 compared to 1.12. So the amount of additional health damage unprotected players take on average has been increased by 28%, and the amount of shock damage unprotected players take has been increased by 32%. If wearing the plate carrier vest, however, which reduced health damage by 50% in 1.11 and shock damage by 26% in 1.11, the health absorption of the plate carrier has been increased to 75% now, and for shock it's now 34%. So from 50 to 75 for health and 26 to 34 for shock. The big truth here is, unarmored players and armored players have much bigger differences in how much damage they can absorb. This results in the health damage gap doubling from 50% to 102%, and the shock damage differences almost tripling from 26% to 67%. I believe from this information it's very clear that the devs want there to be a bigger gap between geared players and ungeared players. These are very big gaps in gear, which is a very controversial change for DayZ. This might just be the biggest change we've seen to the gear gap since the start of DayZ, because if you have geared players that are too strong, they dominate and they stop the ungeared players from getting gear, which isn't very fun for the ungeared players. Now this is a very complicated topic, so I'd love to get your opinion on the changes to the gear gap. And remember, it's not just the plate carrier that's been buffed here. The press vest, stab vest and helmets have been buffed, so armor in general has been buffed. The gear gap is bigger. Now if you're wondering how much the press vest and the stab vest absorbs in this patch, I've added armor to the damage drop off tool on the website. Simply select the weapon or weapons you want to see, then select the health or the shock damage of the armor piece that you want to see the damage numbers for. You'll probably be surprised by the damage reduction of the plate carrier here. It's currently not possible to one-shot kill a player with any weapon against the plate carrier now, so aiming for the legs is a good idea in this instance, which you can learn more about in this video. Or if you want to learn about the damage drop off and why these lines taper off like this, which is very important to know by the way in this patch, you can watch a video about that here. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know your thoughts below and have a good day.